Judge rightly said, they were a big product in which what the banks would do in the over-the-counter market is sell a knockout. So if you wanted to buy, if you didn't think silver was going to trade at $29, you could buy a put. But if you lose all your money, if before it expires, it gets to that price. So let's say that you bought these puts with a knockout provision when silver was $25 and you wanted, so they would sell you that, and the put would remain viable for as long a duration that they sold it to you but if it hits $29, you're gone. You've lost all your money. Now, this became a very serious issue when the Swiss National Bank in 2013 and 14 was trying to hold its peg at 1.20, because there were people who were trying to attack the peg and there were evidently people who bought Euro Swiss calls saying, well, the Swiss is going to prevail. Volatility was low. And so as long as it didn't tick 119.99, your calls were still good. Okay, are you following me? Yes? Okay. So one night on EBS, the huge electronic broker system for the banks, they had a 119.95 print on EBS, which is considered almost like the Bible at that time of the cash markets. And the Swiss National Bank said, no, we're on the bid for all you can possibly do at 120. There can be no 119.95. I don't know how the issue was resolved, because there was supposedly a lot of knockout calls with that knockout covenant. And I think the Swiss National Bank prevailed, saying, no, we were on the bid for all you could possibly want to sell. And they had to, and the knockout didn't take place at the time. So that's how those work. But the only thing that triggers you losing the money is when it prints that. So let's see, I'm just surmising that, because the high print is at 29 even on the SEP silver futures right now. It just hit it. So I'm wondering whether there was a sizable knockout that the market went to get. If you get a little nefarious, you can almost think that the bank traders were trading. That's the way it used to be done back in the bad old days or the good old days, depending what side of the equation you measure on, where the banks would trade, and knowing that there was they would push the market, especially when the markets were thin, to get the knockout selected. Does everybody understand that? Then I can sign off.
Yeah, I get it. Anybody else need any further clarification on that? It was just a huge game forever. And, notoriously, in the interbank market and in the banks and in the dealing rooms, they would just elect this stuff, when the thinnest parts of the day, and when you've seen all this volatility in FX, when it happens between 4 and 5 o'clock in the afternoon Chicago time, when nobody's in, and they'll elect stops worldwide in currencies that build up. You see it all the time. Not all the time, but you see, that's when you get these really big extremes in the currencies. And then as soon as the next, when Wellington or Tokyo come in, and the market goes back to balance.
Well, actually, Judd, Wellington had a reputation. It's changed because I think the New Zealand and Australian regulators really came down on him. And there were some sizable lawsuits when some bank customers realized that the banks were actually operating against his best interest with these knockouts. You haven't seen as much of it, but it's something that Andrew, I'm sure, could discuss far better than I. I never used them, but I was very attentive to them because you would sometimes see markets run into a brick wall in a very strange area. It just made no sense. And then I did I got a big education about these knockouts.
Well, because I had clients and they were, private wealth people, and they'd go, well, my broker and my bank selling me this knockout and that knockout. It's like, okay, enjoy.
Yeah, they were a very popular product for a while, but then I think a lot of these private wealth offices and private equity and hedge funds realized that the banks were not necessarily aligned with their best interests when they were selling them.
Yeah, and it was still big in the, like in 2010, 12, 13, 14, they were still using them.
Oh, here's an interesting story that just broke. Today's about pension funds. Richard Ingram is out as the executive director of the Illinois Teachers Retirement System after an investigation led by a former U.S. attorney. Just breaking. Can you imagine that? God, I can't.
In Illinois? Come on.
Yeah, I will say this. My dear Alexandra, the one who works at Bloomberg, for her master's thesis, her thesis was on the Illinois teachers retirement. And that doesn't include the Chicago teachers, by the way. They're not in that. But she did her, that's how she got a job at Bloomberg. They were so impressed. She won the department award as the best graduate thesis in journalism for her piece on that. It was phenomenal. I was impressed. Very impressed.
Sounds like actual journalism, unlike what we're getting today,
Hey, Pete, I'm going to tell you what, she's a tenacious little thing. I mean, she was all New England rugby player at BU. She's tenacious, really a great athlete, great skier, great
That's
athlete,
great.
and tenacious. So she called down to Springfield and said, under the Freedom of Information Act, I would like to have a copy of all your investments. And I'm entitled to it. They said, no, you can't have it.
Really?
It sounds
Yeah.
like calling up the CME for a run of the clearance.
So she called, she says, you have to give this to me. They said, well, you have to come down and get it. She got in the car and drove down to Springfield and got it. And she was working with a professor. Huh?
That's a deceptively long drive.
Well, no, we're from Chicago, but she went to Springfield and she was working. She went and found a guy at the University of Illinois Chicago campus who was an expert on derivatives contracts and everything else. Because when she found out what was in their portfolio, she couldn't believe it, which is what her paper wound up being on. And so the professor wife was actually a compliance officer for a hedge fund in Chicago. So Alexandra gave, he said, well, when you get it, print it out, run a copy, and we'll look at it together. So he gave her the whole, it was 40 or 50 pages of positions. So he left it inadvertently on the table in his house. So when his wife came home, she looked at it, she says, whose position? What is this? Some crazy hedge fund with these positions? He says, what are you doing? You left this paper? He said, I'm reading these positions. She said, no, that's the Illinois Teachers Retirement System. She says, no, it can't be. He says, yeah.
Guy's been hanging out the bar with CME traders too long, I guess, huh?
Oh my God. Yeah. In fact, I'm going to call Alexandra right now because she doesn't know this. She'll be amazed. They actually wanted her to write a book about it, but Bloomberg wasn't going to publish it. And I think this will be interesting. Oh, I gotta call her and tell her she's gonna be,
All
but
right.
this story just broke.
It's unbelievable.
All right. Well, I'm gonna take off. I'll pick it up tomorrow, guys. Thanks a lot.
I'm out of here too. I'm out of here too. Thanks.